the skeptical theist points to, they might actually, lead to really bad things down the road. So I agree that that objection to the evil God is an unsuccessful objection, which doesn't make belief in that evil God a reasonable thing. It just means that that particular objection to it isn't a good objection to it.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and, Robin, go ahead.
Okay, this is directed to Mike. I have a worry about, with skeptical theism, about just general inductive inferences, not necessarily in the moral realm. And first of all, it seems to me inductive inferences themselves depend on a sort of no-seum assumption. I don't see any relevant difference between, let's say, the past today and the future. Let's say if you lived out in San Francisco, you might inductively infer, well, earthquake's probably not going to occur tomorrow because it hasn't occurred in a long time. I don't see any relevant difference. But if it does depend on a no-seum-like assumption, then it seems you could construct a parallel argument to yours that we really don't know that, for example, the sun will rise tomorrow because, as far as we know, there might be a relevant difference. Namely, God might have, there's a possible state overriding reason for God to annihilate the universe in the next 10 minutes. And we don't know whether there is or not. And if that's right, then we don't know that, or at least can't be certain that the sun will rise tomorrow.
Yeah, I think I'm a supporter of induction, and I think it's reasonable to believe in accord with induction. And I think we can't, unless, I shouldn't say unless, but one thing that would keep us from an inductive inference in a particular case is if we thought, hey man, I've got no good reason to think that the sample I have is representative. So I don't think induction works from known goods, evils, entailments between them to the goods, evils, entailments there are. So there, that induction doesn't work. As for the sun rising tomorrow, I guess I think that that objection is sort of like saying theists can't do science because, they think God exists and God could intervene at any moment. I guess I do think that theists take that possibility, well, some theists, the theists who think that God might still, perform miracles. Theists who think that are going to think that's more within the realm of possibility than atheists will. They won't think that that's going to be a problem. But they can still, be highly confident that the future will be like the past, and even that God's not going to intervene. I mean, again, based on induction. God, miracles are very rare, if we've seen any at all, and so we can inductively infer that probably there won't be such a miracle tomorrow, even if it's slightly less confidence than there probably won't be a miracle. It probably won't be the God annihilating the universe tomorrow. So I put confidence in these common sense belief sources, and I can infer that God probably, just like I can infer that God doesn't have an all things considered good reason for annihilating me yesterday, because I wasn't annihilated yesterday. So also I can infer that if I know that the sun's probably going to rise tomorrow, then I can say, well, God probably doesn't have a reason to perform a miracle to annihilate the sun tomorrow. So I can know some things about God's reasons. I can't know them by my contemplation of the goods, evils, and entailments there are and what reasons he might have. I can know them from taking the outputs of my common sense knowledge and drawing inferences from him, from them, I guess.
Yes.
This is clarification for Mike Bergmann. Consider the following two rather complex events: the life of Mother Teresa of Calcutta and the life of Saddam Hussein. Now, I know that you believe that Teresa's life was morally a better life than Saddam's, but consider the question of which of these is best, all things considered, which contributes more to the goodness of the world overall. My understanding is that your view is that we have absolutely no idea whether one is better than the other, and if so, which. So my question is, first, is that in fact your view? And if it is, can you say anything to help some of us understand how that's compatible with moral common sense.
Yes, it's my view that the all things, if we're thinking about the all things considered ultimate consequences of Mother Teresa's life and Saddam Hussein's life, we're in the dark about those. And so if we want to know which of those, contributes the most to increasing the total, I say we're in the dark. I mean, one thing to say is they're both made in God's image, so that's a good reason for thinking they're both very valuable. But I'm not sure. I mean, I don't find that a difficult bullet to bite, I guess.
In many ways, for being students of Al, colleagues of Al, grad students of Al, or in some other way, I believe that we're the philosophers we are because of the influence that Al Plantinga has had in our lives. And it's an impressive group of folks, I mean, excluding myself, but I mean, just looking around, I'm overwhelmed. But so let me just make this one comment, that I think the ST 1 through 4 are clearly true. They're reminiscent of some things that Bill Alston said at the end of a book on inductive arguments from evil and God's permission, some temporary final thoughts or something like that on God's permission of evil, and he throws out a lot of these reasons to be skeptical about what we know, the relationships would be between goods and evils and so forth. But I think we should be even way more skeptical. I mean, ST3 is sort of just scratching the surface, right? The entailments there might be between the logical entailments, but I mean, there's also causal relationships between these. And if we bring in considerations of free actions and so forth, taking the understanding of freedom that Al invoked in the trans-world depravity argument and so forth, some people think even God can't possibly know the consequences, like what would this person do if that person does this and so forth, if this happens to them, how will they react, and then how will their parents and family. I mean, it's so complicated at so many levels of possible branches and so forth that it's a cinch we're not going to get it at all, right? God perhaps does understand all these kinds of consequences. I think God does. Some in the room think he doesn't, but I mean, so it seems to me we should just add a whole bunch more of these similar to ST 3 and 4. We can have 5, 6, 7, 8. There are so many ways in which it seems to me we're just clueless about whether this or that particular case is justifiable given the various implications.
I'll just say something quickly about that. In the case of causal consequences, right, we are in the dark about those, and that plays a factor in our moral reasoning. They won't, I don't think, play a role in God's reasoning when he's trying to decide, since he can overrule the laws of nature or the normal cause and effect. That's why it's not mentioned in that list. But you mentioned the trans-world depravity case. Right, one thing other than entailments that might be relevant would be, so God, in deciding what he might want to permit or not, would be limited by the constraints of entailments, but also by facts such as every creaturely essence is trans-world depraved. That might also place some limits on God, assuming God has middle knowledge.
Yes, over here.
So I came out of the discussion of a loving God wouldn't permit that, sort of more sympathetic to the anti-skeptical theist than I was before. I was wondering if you have sort of anything more that might be persuasive. So I listened to the arguments and say, well, I mean, you appealed to a kind of induction from the fact that we should be willing to permit some sorts of evils for the sake of bringing about greater goods or preventing worse evil. I say fine, but that doesn't mean that it extends to all these other worse evils. And then you appeal to this fact about, well, there can be evils that outweigh these evils that are permitted. I say, well, if that sort of argument works, that would rule out any kind of appeal to say, you shouldn't intend something, shouldn't intend an evil, for the sake of, you shouldn't intend an evil even if it brings about some greater good or prevents some worse evil. So I'm wondering whether the mere fact that some goods are worse, greater than worse than others, do you think that's sufficient to make the argument that it would be morally right for you to permit it, or do you think that a further argument needs to be given, right, for why permitting such an evil is morally permissible?
I'm sorry that.
I mean, so here's my worry. I mean, people who make arguments against, so you seem to be sympathetic to the view that some sorts of actions are intrinsically morally wrong, right? One way of making this case for this, saying, well, the reason why some acts are morally wrong is because it's wrong to intend some evil, right? Intend it, even if some greater good gets realized as a result. But it seems like the argument that you gave here, right, would show that that